Throughout the American West, they can be found. The forgotten places.
We formed our band and we're all well manned to journey afar to the promised land where the golden ore's rich in store and we'll never need to look for more. Then ho, brothers, ho, to California go. There's plenty of gold in the world, we're told, on the banks of the Sacramento. Hi-ho, and away we go, looking for the gold that lies below. Hi-ho, and away we go, digging up the gold that is there we know.
A century ago, their names alone were enough to make men sell their last possessions to pay for a trip west in search of gold and silver. Places with names like Rosita, Tin Cup, St. Elmo, Bachelor Flats. Men came by the thousands to pan the streams and dig the earth in search of the endless wealth they'd been told was awaiting them. And wherever they struck pay dirt, they built towns, towns fairly bursting with song, gunfire, and the giddiness of new riches. Here they fought the wilderness and wrenched from its grasp the wealth a growing nation needed. There was plenty of gold in the world, they were told, and they believed it. Until the mines played out. And they did play out.
There's plenty of gold. There's plenty of gold.
With their limited technology, the miners of the last century could take advantage of only the high-grade ore deposits. And when those rich veins were gone, once flourishing towns died. Today, we are no less dependent on the treasures of the earth than the cities of a century ago. The earth's mineral wealth still forms the very backbone of society. Not just the glamour elements like gold or silver, but the basic minerals which have become indispensable to our way of life. Bauxite for aluminum, iron ore for steel, copper for electrical wiring, potash and phosphates for fertilizer, rock, gravel, and sand for building, lead, tin, nickel. The list goes on and on. Every manufactured product, from can opener to 747, depends upon the output of mines. The obvious fact is, without a continuing supply of minerals, modern life as we know it cannot continue. And just as obvious is the need to take these minerals without damaging the planet which has provided them. There are many who draw ominous conclusions from the fate of the ghost towns. They foresee a world filled with the ghost towns of our civilization. After all, they say, the wealth buried beneath the Earth's surface is finite, its limits set in the heat of creation. When it is gone, there will be no more. And further, some say, to get what is there may result in massive damage to the environment. In the Club of Rome's provocative study on the limits to growth, scientists determined that if the demand for minerals continues upward at its present rate, the world's known reserves of many minerals will be depleted within a few decades. No nation is immune to this forecast. The United States, for example, long thought to be self-sufficient in iron and copper, is finding these two common minerals harder and more expensive to locate and produce. The U.S. is particularly dependent on imports of 9 critical metals, 100% of its chromium and platinum, 95% of its manganese, over 80% of its bauxite, nickel, mercury, and tin, and over 50% of its tungsten and zinc. A serious shortage of these minerals in America could have drastic repercussions, not only on the U.S. economy, but on worldwide economic stability. So, are we then destined to leave behind the ruins of our civilization? Will the mineral base of our society play out? Will our planet become a moonscape of environmental destruction? The answer, it need not be that way. The miners who sang that there was plenty of gold had only limited technology and ineffectively claimed the Earth's wealth. Today, we have the means, if we apply them wisely and responsibly, to make our mineral resources stretch to accommodate the world's demand almost indefinitely, without irreparable damage. The job can be done, provided 5 conditions are met. First, we must find new mineral deposits, wherever they may be, however remote. In deserts, mountains, forests, even in the oceans. Second, we must learn to make use of low-grade ore deposits, once considered unrecoverable or uneconomical. Third, we must learn not to waste, to use and reuse precious minerals whenever and however possible. Fourth, we must promote and achieve continuing international cooperation to ensure a free flow of vital raw materials to all nations around the world. And fifth, we, all of us, must be willing to assume the inevitably higher cost of locating, mining, refining, using and reusing these minerals, plus the additional cost of restoring and reclaiming the areas from which they came. It's a big job with enormous risks and no simple solutions. But it can be done. It's a job which is already underway. First, the search for minerals. Until recently, man looked for minerals with his nose to the ground, depending upon the forces of erosion and upheaval to reveal what had been hidden. Now that's all being changed. Confined to his planet, man could never really see the big picture of his world. But the view from orbit, as witnessed by the Skylab astronauts, gives us fresh insights into the Earth and her resources. Geologists have long known that minerals are most easily found near faults in the Earth's surface. But over the centuries, wind and rain have worn down these cracks until many of them are undetectable from the ground. From orbit, astronauts can employ radiometers, electromagnetic spectrum recorders, and infrared photography to study vast areas of the Earth. They can pinpoint likely mineral-bearing formations which otherwise might go unnoticed. Skylab's unmanned little brother in orbit is the Earth Resources Technology Satellite, known as ERTS. ERTS has crisscrossed the globe, providing scientists on Earth with studies of virtually every square mile of the planet. So voluminous was the information gathered by ERTS that it will be studied for years to come, evolving into a total picture of the Earth's surface. The view from orbit tells us much about the planet's resources, but the aerial search must be narrowed, brought closer to Earth. The yellow capsule under this airplane looks like a bomb, but actually it is part of a sophisticated surveying system which allows geophysicists to look beneath the Earth's surface before turning a spade full of dirt. Employing an electromagnetic system, which works something like radar, a signal is directed from the airplane to the ground below. The signals are bounced back by any metal or sulfide ore deposits in the Earth and recorded by the receiver, which is towed behind the plane. The intensity of these signals give the searchers a record of mineral concentrations and their geographic boundary.
It's cold, brothers, cold. It's onward west we go. There's plenty of gold in the world, we're told, and we're bound for El Dorado. Hi-ho, and away we go, looking for the gold that lies below. Hi-ho, and away we go, digging up the gold that is there we know.
Finally, following the aerial surveys, a ground crew moves in, using a similar technique to narrow the search even further. It's a deceptively simple procedure, but it is capable of telling the prospectors the size and shape of a buried deposit, its depth, and whether it is lying flat or at an angle beneath the surface. Eventually, core samples are drilled to verify what the earlier tests have indicated. And even old core samples are revealing new secrets. For nearly a century, individuals, companies, and governments have been taking core samples from around the world and filing them away on musty shelves. Now these samples are being re-examined, subjected to new tests. The men who drew the samples may have been looking for just one kind of mineral. When they didn't find it, they moved on, often ignoring other elements present in the samples. Today, we are looking once again to see just what earlier searchers might have missed.
As oft we roam through the dark sea foam, we'll ne'er forget dear friends at home. But memory kind shall bring to mind the love of those we left behind.
Then ho, brothers, ho, it's outward west we go. There's plenty of gold in the world we're told.
The search for new minerals reaches from outer space to inner space, the oceans themselves. In time, the ocean's floor may play an important role in supplying the world's mineral needs. These blackish lumps are mineral nodules, formations of manganese, copper, cobalt, and almost 30 other minerals which have been collecting around tiny objects on the ocean bottom for millions of years. In the future, suction-powered dredges may be lowered to beds of nodules 5 miles deep, providing man with billions of tons of minerals once thought unrecoverable. So, new discovery is the first condition for assuring ample supplies of essential minerals. The second condition is that we develop and utilize low-grade ore deposits thought worthless in years past. New processing technology allows today's miners to refine raw ores containing only a fraction of 1% of the base mineral. Of course, claiming such low-grade ores requires massive and large-scale excavation of the raw material. Responsible mining companies are now taking extraordinary measures to restore the terrain to normal configuration after mining for return to productive use. But the answer to meeting the world's mineral requirements is not simply to dig more. What happens to the minerals after they have been refined and turned into millions of products? What do we do with them after their initial use? Although we rarely think of it as such, trash is one of our greatest resources and growing each year. How much tin, steel, aluminum, and copper, for instance, ends up at the bottom of sanitary landfills or in roadside ditches? If our mineral requirements are to be met, we must learn to conserve and reuse what we already have. And while we've scratched the surface of condition 3, our lifestyles must change to accommodate the life of conservation our ancestors lived in order to survive. This means collecting, shredding, and resmelting products such as aluminum cans, a simple process which produces new ingots with less than 5% of the energy required to make the virgin metal. 1 of every 7 aluminum cans manufactured in the United States is being recycled. This process recovers enough aluminum to cast all the engine blocks of all the subcompact cars built in the country. But what if 4 or 5 of every 7 cans could be recycled? Or all of them? Recycling can be applied to almost any mineral. Today, the steel industry is reducing junk rust heaps to scrap metal and then resmelting that metal to be used and used again. Such reuse provides a double benefit. It dramatically increases the supply of critical metals while decreasing the volume of solid refuse to be eliminated. The fourth condition for ensuring adequate mineral supplies to the world involves international cooperation, as critical elements are often found in locations that are extremely difficult and costly for men to reach. Take, for example, Mount Whaleback, a mountain of iron ore in the remote Australian outback, almost 300 miles from the continent's northwest shore. When geologists first studied this virtually uninhabited area, they discovered Mount Whaleback was packed with iron ore from its crest, 700 feet above the desert plain, to a depth of at least 1,000 feet below the plain surface. A reserve of 1,000 million tons of high-grade ore for an ore-hungry world. But there was no way to develop it. No adequate roads, no nearby cities, no way of moving the ore or refining it or shipping it. In a textbook example of international cooperation, mining companies from Australia, Great Britain, the United States, and Japan formed a joint venture, naming their project after the largest mountain in the area, Mount Newman. An incredible array of mining equipment was moved piece by piece into the outback, and gradually an entire city grew where there had been only a desolate landscape. Then, to get the ore out, they built a 265-mile-long railroad to the coast and a port capable of handling 160,000-ton cargo vessels. The result, 6,000 tons per hour. 30 million tons of iron ore a year is flowing from Mount Newman to the markets of the world. Halfway around the globe, in another extremely remote area, an even more incredible effort of the mining industry. The Black Angel, a vein of lead and zinc located 2,000 feet up the face of a sheer cliff above Mamerlik Fjord on Greenland's west coast. The Black Angel was first discovered in 1964. Since that time, tests have shown the reserves to contain at least 20% combined lead and zinc, representing millions of tons of these critical elements. But how were men to mine that ore, embedded in rock, in permanently frozen conditions, in a place where only seagulls could reach it? Almost unbelievably, the job was done. With ships and cable cars and large quantities of inventiveness and courage, the Black Angel became one of North America's outstanding mining accomplishments with minimal environmental disturbance. Today, miners work in shafts sunk into the face of the cliff, lowering the ore by cable car to the waiting cargo ships far below.
Well, the gold is there most anywhere. You can dig it out with an iron bar. And where it's thick with a spade or pick, you can take out lumps as big as a brick.
And what of our fifth condition? The cost of assuring a continual flow of minerals around the world. The development of new technology is expensive. So are the massive construction and equipment requirements to reach, mine, and transport low-grade ores. And today, the added expense of environmental protection and reclamation is a very real part of the total price of fulfilling the world's mineral needs. Costly? Yes. Necessary? Yes. For instance, the reawakened town of Princeton in southern British Columbia. Born in the 1860s with the discovery of gold, it lingered for years on copper after the gold was gone.
Hi-ho and away we go, looking for the gold that lies below. Hi-ho and away we go.
When the richest copper deposits had also been tapped, it subsided to a near ghost town. But today, 800 feet above the Similkameen River outside Princeton, 28% copper concentrate is being produced from ore containing 0.5% copper at the rate of 10,000 tons of copper concentrate a year from a reserve of 76 million tons of ore. The effort involved 2 miles of pipeline between the initial capacitor and the concentrating plant, with a 1,000-foot span over the river canyon. Dams at either end of a valley to permit reuse of 70% of the water involved in mining. And as a closed system storage area for tailings that will eventually be reforested with tens of thousands of trees to restore the area. It involved the planned construction of family unit communities and a truck transportation system to get the ore concentrate to the docks in Vancouver, where it can be shipped to our international community. Contrast this with the millions of tons of high-grade copper ore embedded in a thumb of rock that rises 12,000 feet above the jungle floor in Indonesia. The Erstberg, Dutch for Ore Mountain. Its riches have been tapped after a gargantuan road-building effort. The miraculous transport of bits and pieces of heavy equipment by helicopter for reassembly at the remote mine site. In addition to native Indonesians, there's now a town of 1,500 made up of a workforce from Korea, the Philippines, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and the United States. And today, an almost science fiction mining operation features a mile-long cable car system to bucket the ore from the mine to the mill site.
We formed our band and we're all well manned to journey afar to the promised land where the golden ore...
And a 46-mile-long gravity run to take the ore slurry to the new ocean port for concentrating, drying, and loading onto cargo ships for transport to the world.
Hi-ho, and away we go, looking for the gold that lies below.
Bougainville in New Guinea, where during World War II, thousands of Americans, Australians, and Japanese fought to the death. The ghosts of the miners of old must mingle in shared amazement with the spirits of almost forgotten casualty lists as former enemies band together in a massive mining operation. An international venture between the Bougainvilleans, Japan, Australia, and the United States has brought together a workforce of 10,000 employed by 200 contractors living in 2 complete new towns as a part of the largest grassroots mining operation ever undertaken. The reason for all this? 900 million tons of ore that will produce 150,000 tons of copper concentrate, 500,000 ounces of gold, and 1 million ounces of silver each year for up to 3 decades. All in an area of only 10 square miles. Mineral recovery needn't always be so difficult, for in other areas, nature has been almost deceptively cooperative. In the northern Philippines, the ocean waves wash this blackish sand ashore to be scooped up for processing. It's magnetite ore and rich in iron. Here on Luzon, the ore has been gathered at the rate of 110,000 metric tons a year. Similar deposits are also being collected on beaches in New Zealand, Australia, and Japan. On Karimun Island in Indonesia, quarrying work, similar to non-metallic mining operations all over the world, is providing materials for construction as granite is reduced to usable size aggregate for critically important building operations. Aggregate for concrete, road building, and countless other uses. Aggregate for the places in the world where the raw material is not available in sufficient quantity to meet the demand. On the edge of the South China Sea, in the Johor state of Malaysia, bauxite, the source of aluminum, lies only a foot below the surface in seams up to 18 feet thick. Heavy equipment need remove only this very thin layer of overburden to reach the ore and transport the bauxite less than 3 miles to the processing plant and port. Malaysia also produces nearly half of the world's tin. The ore, in alluvial deposits washed down from the mountains over the centuries, is mined by both hydraulic and dredge methods. The slurry is washed over sluices, where the heavier ore settles out for processing.
band and we're all well manned to journey afar to the promised land where the golden ores...
Perhaps, then, the miners of old were right in their optimistic view. There is plenty of gold. Gold in the form of all the precious minerals and metals that support our existence. But there remain many obstacles to claiming them. There are no simple solutions to keeping the wheels of civilization turning. Making available on an international basis the minerals necessary for our survival. It will require muscles and machines, study and planning, responsible concern for the environment, international cooperation, and courage. All of the world's people need a continuing supply of minerals to survive on this planet. There must be access to this supply by all nations, all men. That access must be safe and secure. It is unthinkable to wall off or deny this basic need for purely political or environmental reasons. It is equally unthinkable to exploit them, completely ignoring those realities. Satisfying the worldwide need for minerals can create a healthy interplay between nations, an exchange, a commerce, a basis of peaceful economic coexistence for the benefit of all the world's people. And if we are ruled by wisdom and reason, the fate of the ghost towns need not be repeated in our time. Indeed, if we make the best use of what we have on this earth without wanton abuse of the planet, then we can truly say there is plenty of gold in the world for us all.